Actor Michael Landon is dead after a battle with inoperable liver and pancreatic cancer. The 54-year-old star of TV's Little House on the Prairie and Bonanza died this afternoon at his home in Malibu, California.
What if I told you the most dangerous man in Hollywood wasn't a movie villain, but a man who played America's favorite dad? Michael Landon seemed like the kindest man to ever grace the screen, but behind the cameras, he ran the set of Little House like a cult. And worst of all, he humiliated women in the worst possible way. Karen Grassle, who was at the receiving end of his maltreatment, is finally revealing the truth. From the shocking details, you just might never be able to look at this show the same way again. To understand why this feud remained buried for so long, we must look at how it all began. The illusion of Walnut Grove. Just like everyone now has a favorite show that keeps them up late at night, one show stuck out for a lot of people in the mid-70s, and it was Little House on the Prairie. It was impossible to not know this show because it was loved amongst families who'd tune in on Sunday nights just to watch this television program. To millions of viewers, the characters Charles and Carolyn Ingalls were the parents everyone wished they had. They were just the right people who portrayed what it was like to live a simple yet honest life while maintaining family standards. From the look of how popular the show was, there was no one who didn't know what the show was. Yeah, sure, the show was popular for its gold standards. It's not denying that another reason why it was a popular watch was also because of the chemistry between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle. Their connection was the glue that held the series together for years. Michael Landon, who played Charles in the show, had spent a long time building this image. After his massive success on the show Bonanza, he knew exactly how to play the part of the ultimate family man. Not only was he a star, but he was also a brand that people trusted with their hearts and their Sunday evenings. However, behind the scenes, the environment was far from peaceful. The set was located in the scorching hills of Simi Valley, California. It was a dusty and demanding place where the cast spent long hours in heavy, period-accurate costumes under the blazing sun. This was a high-stakes business venture, as NBC had invested millions of dollars riding on the wholesome reputation of the show. If the public found out about any trouble on the set, the money could vanish overnight. When Karen Grassle first landed the role of Caroline, she was excited to get to work. She came from a professional theater background and felt a great deal of respect for Michael's talent and vision. He was the executive producer, the writer, and also lead actor. However, as the seasons moved forward, the atmosphere on set started to take a different turn than she had hoped for. A strange corporate drama began to play out behind the barn doors. The happy family the world loved was becoming a mask for a much more complicated reality. The tension was growing, and the power dynamics were starting to reveal a side of Michael that no one in the audience could have predicted. But as the cameras stopped rolling, Karen had noticed a troubling behavior from Landon that left her wondering who she was really working for. Landon, being the star actor, director, and executive director of Little House, gave him a level of absolute control that few people in Hollywood could only dream of. He has the final say on most of the decisions, and if he had a specific vision for a scene, that was exactly how it was going to be filmed. There was no room for debate or creative differences. This was the Landon way. You either followed it, or you found yourself on the outside looking in. The people on set were often split into two camps. Some crew members worshipped him as a genius and stayed fiercely loyal. They saw his incredible work ethic and the way he carried the massive production on his back. Others felt the heavy weight of his growing ego. Success at that level can do strange things to a person. Michael was one of the biggest stars on the planet. He eventually developed what many described as a God complex. He expected total devotion from everyone around him. For Karen Grassle, the realization was a tough pill to swallow. She started the show thinking they were creative partners, but that slowly faded away, and she came to see that he was her employer, who held both her career and her paycheck in his hands. He micromanaged everything from the lighting to the way a bonnet was tied. Nothing was too small for his attention. This meant the pressure was constant. Perfection was a daily staple because his eyes were always watching. There were even accounts of him giving this cold look or comments that were made in front of the whole crew to humiliate someone. He used his status to remind everyone who was really in charge. This created a strange tension that lived right under the surface of those peaceful prairie scenes. While the viewers who tuned in regularly were busy learning lessons about kindness and neighborly love, the actors were trying to find a way around a workplace where one man held all the power. Karen soon learned that in Landon's world, you were either with him or you were a target, and she was about to find out which side she was on. The Paycheck Battle. The first season of Little House on the Prairie was a huge success. It was one of those rare moments in television history where everything just clicked. The show ratings were high, and fans couldn't get enough of it. In no time, Karen Grassle began to realize that her character, Caroline Ingalls, was one of the reasons the show worked so well. Her character, as well as the character Landon played, was what the fans loved to see. After the success of Season 1, it was only fair that actors would get a raise. When the time came to negotiate for the second season, she decided it was time to ask for a salary that reflected her value. She was not asking to be the highest-paid person on television. All she wanted was a pay that matched the skyrocketing popularity of not just her character, but the show as well. When she sat down to talk about the money, she expected Michael to be supportive, but instead, she met a brick wall. He blatantly refused her request because, according to him, she wasn't the main reason for the show's success, and she was only a supporting character who should be grateful for the job she had. He went ahead to insist that her pay would remain the same because she was not as important to the show as he was. Now, you would think this was so absurd and cruel, but that was just a classic move in the 1970s television industry. Back then, female leads were often paid tiny fractions of what their male co-stars made. It was a boys' club, and Michael was the chairman of the board. The situation took a darker turn when Michael hinted that she was easily replaceable. He went ahead to point out how fans cared for his character Pa, but Ma was someone they could swap out if they needed to. Of course, Karen read between the lines. This was a threat and a direct attack on her talent and her contribution to the series. Right there and then, the connection she thought she had with her co-star shattered. The man who played her loving husband on screen had very little respect for her as a professional off-screen. The magic of Walnut Grove was starting to feel like a trap. Despite the fear of losing her job, Karen chose to hold the line. She stayed firm in her request for fair pay. This was not only about the money anymore, it was about her dignity as an actress. She knew that standing up to Michael was a dangerous move. He was the most powerful man in the industry at the time. Still, she refused to let him bully her into silence. Her bravery created a massive rift on the set that would last for years, and this rebellion came with a heavy price. She had officially moved from his circle of friends to his list of enemies. Landon's refusal to pay her fairly was only the beginning. He began to use his power to punish her in much more personal ways. The atmosphere on the set of the show changed almost overnight. Since Michael was kind of the boss and called the shots, every other person who worked on set followed his lead in everything. If Michael thought something was funny, everyone else laughed along to stay on his good side. This is where things got ugly for Karen. The friction between her and Landon was palpable, and it was mainly noticeable from the way Landon handled the situation. According to the 83-year-old actress, he would constantly make cruel and filthy jokes that seemed to follow her everywhere she went on the set. Michael would wait until she was nearby to start telling stories to make her uncomfortable. He also took it up a notch by openly talking about the female body and using graphic language that would never be allowed in a professional work setting. In one specific instance, he began making disgusting remarks about female anatomy, while the crew stood around and cheered him on. It did not stop with dirty jokes. Michael started to pick on her acting and her appearance. He would mock the way she delivered a line or make comments about how she looked in her costume. He also went as far as cutting out her scenes. They laughed at his insults because they did not want to be his next target. Karen had to deal with sexism while shooting for everyone's favorite show. You might wonder why other women on the set did not say anything to help her. The truth is that everyone was fighting for their own survival in a very competitive industry. The young girls on the show saw Michael as a father figure, and the other female staff knew that crossing him meant losing their jobs. It was so crazy because there was no word for in the mid-1970s. You were expected to take the abuse and keep smiling for the cameras. He wanted her to know that even if she got a raise, he could still make her life miserable. If you think the verbal jabs were bad, wait until you hear what happened when they had to film their most intimate scenes together. The truth behind the bed scenes. Every episode of the show followed a specific ritual that fans absolutely loved. The story would usually end with Ma and Pa Ingalls tucked into their bed, sharing a quiet moment or a gentle laugh right before the lights went out. To the millions of families watching at home, these scenes were always worth the wait. However, for Karen Grassle, these moments were a complete nightmare. While the world saw a loving husband, Karen was trapped with a man who was using the situation to humiliate her. The cameras would be positioned close to the bed, and the lighting was kept low to create a cozy feel. In those tight quarters, Landon would lean in and whisper filthy jokes or crude insults, while the crew prepared the shots. He specifically targeted the female anatomy, making graphic comments with the aim of upsetting her. Because they were in the middle of a scene, Karen felt she had to stay in character. She had to keep that famous Caroline Ingalls smile on her face while her co-star said things that made her skin crawl. If you go back and watch those old clips today, you would probably see the tension. Her smiles often look tight or forced, and her body language is stiff because she is trying to protect herself from the psychological warfare happening just inches away. This was not just a case of someone having a bad sense of humor. It was a calculated way for Landon to assert his dominance. He knew she could not walk away once the director called for places. In a 2021 interview with Inside Edition, Karen finally put a name to this behavior. She finally called it. During the 1970s, such behavior was common, and there were no HR handbooks or seminars on workplace safety, so virtually anything slid. Karen had to endure this maltreatment in silence because she knew Landon had the power to end her career with a single phone call. She was playing the part of the most respected woman on television while being treated with zero respect the moment the sound was cut. The pressure of the set was made even worse by Michael's personal habits. Karen observed a ritual that most of the audience never knew about. Mike drank heavily throughout the day. It was a common rumor that his coffee cup was often filled with more than just caffeine. This created a wild card factor on the set. The cast and crew never knew who was going to show up to the makeup table in the morning. Sometimes it was the charming, kind Michael who told stories and made everyone feel like a family. Other times, it was the short-tempered Michael who was ready to snap at the smallest mistake. This drinking habit had a direct impact on how he treated the actors. As the day went on and the alcohol took hold, his temper became more and more unpredictable. He could be incredibly cruel to anyone he felt was not performing up to his standards. Despite this, Landon was a master of his craft. He could be in the middle of a frustrated outburst, hear the word action, and immediately transform back into the perfect father figure character. He wore a mask of sobriety and kindness that was so convincing it fooled the entire world. He was the king of the public face. He would turn on the charm for the press and the fans, giving them exactly what they wanted to see. However, behind closed doors, he was a different person. The man who championed family values on screen was the same man creating a toxic environment for his lead actress. Of course, no one wanted to be the person to report the biggest star on NBC for drinking or being a bully. The stakes were too high for everyone involved. Karen was living a double life. In public, she was half of the most beloved couple in America. In private, she was a professional woman trying to survive a workplace run by a powerful man with a drinking problem and a mean streak. She was trapped in a gilded cage, but eventually, the pressure of playing the perfect wife to a man she despised became too much to bear. The breaking point. By the time the 8th season rolled around, Karen felt more like a prisoner than a star. The end of her contract was finally in sight, and the feeling was not one of sadness. It was pure relief. Years of fighting for a fair wage and enduring Michael's crude behavior had taken a massive toll on her. The passion she once had for the role of Caroline Ingalls was gone. It had been replaced by an emotional exhaustion that stayed with her even after she left the set each night. Choosing to walk away was a huge risk because Little House on the Prairie was a steady, high-paying job that most actors would have dreamed of. However, Karen realized that her mental health was worth more than a paycheck. She could no longer stomach the idea of smiling for a man who went out of his way to make her feel small. When she finally told Michael she was leaving, his reaction was exactly what she expected. He acted in a nonchalant way, trying to let her know that the show would go on perfectly fine without her. The final days of filming were incredibly awkward. Standing next to Michael to film their last scenes together felt like a difficult chore. The chemistry the world loved was completely dead behind their eyes. When the cameras finally stopped for the last time, Karen did not look back. She needed to find out who she was outside of the Ma Ingalls archetype. For years, the world only saw her as a quiet, submissive pioneer woman. She struggled to break free from that image and prove she was a versatile actress. She eventually found her way back to the stage. Theater offered her a sense of creative freedom that Hollywood never could. She enjoyed the relief of silence, knowing that she no longer had to navigate Michael's temper or the toxic energy of the Simi Valley set. She moved on with her life and built a new career. The public still saw her as the perfect mother, and she let them keep that memory for a long time. She did not want to destroy the legacy of the show while Michael was still the king of television. She stayed quiet, watched from a distance, and processed the trauma of those years in private. For decades, Karen kept these secrets locked away, but the death of Michael Landon changed everything. In April 1991, the media was shocked when the news broke that Michael Landon revealed he had been battling pancreatic cancer, and it had become terminal. The public and his fans were absolutely crushed, as he was a part of their family nights. He made an appearance on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, where he talked about his illness and also to debunk rumors related to his health and family life. He promised he would fight the disease with everything he had, which only made people have an emotional connection to him more. For Karen Grassle, watching this from a distance was incredibly complicated. She was seeing the world mourn a man who had caused her so much pain, and she felt a deep internal conflict. Part of her was still angry about the years of harassment and the pay disputes, yet she also felt empathy for a human being facing the end of his life. She eventually decided that she could not let him go without saying something. She decided to call him to mend fences. For Karen, it was a chance to find a sliver of peace after years of carrying around bitterness. She was able to see him as a flawed man rather than just a powerful boss. Unfortunately, Michael Landon passed away only 3 months after his diagnosis in July 1991 at the age of 54. The moment he died, his image became untouchable. The media and the fans turned him into a legend, a saint of the small screen who could do no wrong. All the stories about his temper or his drinking were buried under a mountain of tributes. He was celebrated as the ultimate father figure, and his legacy was set in stone. Karen watched as the world canonized the man she knew was much more complex than his public persona. She went back to her life, keeping her stories to herself, while the rest of the world celebrated the myth of Charles Ingalls. She spent years watching the show remain popular in reruns. Every time it aired, she saw her younger self smiling at a man who had often made her life a misery. The weight of the secret started to feel heavier as the years went by. She realized that by staying silent, she was helping to maintain a lie that felt wrong. She was not interested in being a victim anymore. She wanted to be a witness, and she knew that the only way to truly heal was to tell the story exactly as it happened, even if it meant shaking the foundation of a Hollywood legend. With Michael gone, his legacy seemed untouchable, until Karen decided that the world needed to know the whole truth. Bright lights, prairie dust. For years, she had carried these memories, and as she got older, the landscape of Hollywood began to change in a way she never expected. The rise of the Me Too movement was also a push and a massive turning point for her. For the first time, women were speaking openly about workplace harassment and the power games men played in the industry. This cultural shift gave Karen the morale she lacked in the 70s. She realized she wasn't just a difficult actress who couldn't take a joke. She was a career woman who had been treated poorly by her boss. This realization was the spark that led her to write her memoir, Bright Lights, Prairie Dust. Writing the book was not an easy choice, because Karen knew that Michael Landon was still a saint in the eyes of the public. When the first details of her book started to leak, the backlash was immediate and intense. Fans were genuinely angry, and they felt like Karen was trying to ruin their childhood by smearing the name of America's favorite figure. Some people accused her of being bitter or looking for a quick payday, but her response was very straightforward. She explained that she wasn't attacking Michael, but rather she only shared her experience as a woman on his set. Just to make peace and calm down the outrage, she apologized, but was firm on telling her story. The book went into detail about things that many fans found hard to stomach. She wrote about the times he made crude comments, the drinking, and the way Michael used his ego to control the working conditions on set. She described the specific passages that highlighted the isolation she felt while playing Caroline Ingalls. These weren't just vague complaints. They were documented moments of a workplace culture that favored men and silenced women. However, she wasn't alone in her perspective. Other cast members began to speak. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura, had always viewed Michael as a father figure, but she also acknowledged that he was a very complex and sometimes difficult man. Alison Arngrim, who played Nellie Oleson, had already written about the wild and often inappropriate nature of the set in her own book. For Karen, the process of putting these words on paper was deeply therapeutic. It allowed her to process wounds that had been festering for over 40 years. She was finally able to separate the character of Charles Ingalls from the man Michael Landon. By telling her truth, she found a sense of peace that no television paycheck could ever buy. She wasn't looking to cancel the show or erase its history. She just wanted people to understand that the perfect family they saw on screen was built through the hard work of people who were often struggling behind the scenes. But as the dust settled on her revelations, the public was faced with a difficult question about distinguishing the art from the artist. How could a man who was capable of such cold and cruel behavior also be the same person who created one of the most beautiful and moral shows in history? There is no denying that Michael Landon was a genius storyteller who had an incredible gift for making people feel deep emotions, and his charisma could light up a room. He understood what the American public needed to see during a time of great change, and he gave it to them with every episode of Little House. From the outside, Landon was an icon, and to hear that he was this monster was hard to believe, especially now that he wasn't alive to defend himself. But with more and more people coming out to share their own experiences, the truth is sometimes a bitter pill to swallow. While the personal stories from the set are heavy, Michael Landon's professional legacy remains a massive part of television history. He was a powerhouse who managed to do what very few could. He moved from being a teen idol to a seasoned star on Bonanza, and eventually became the captain of his own ship with Little House on the Prairie. His accomplishments are undeniable. He received several Golden Globe nominations for his acting and a Western Heritage Award for his work on the Prairie. Later in his career, he continued his streak of hits with Highway to Heaven, proving he had a unique formula for success that resonated with the heart of America. His achievements went beyond just acting. He was one of the most prolific writers and directors of his era, often handling every part of a production at once. He was eventually honored with a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame after his death. However, when you look at the awards for the women of Little House, the record is surprisingly thin. Despite being the emotional anchor of the series, Karen Grassle did not walk away with an Emmy or a Golden Globe for her role as Caroline. While the show itself won several technical Emmys, and Melissa Sue Anderson received a nomination for her performance as Mary, the woman of the house was often overlooked during awards season. The thought of the late actor being a visionary leader one minute and a bully the next is a complexity that makes his story so fascinating and also frustrating. Today, a new generation of viewers watching the show with different eyes can now see and understand the power dynamics and the workplace culture of old Hollywood for what it really was. Surprisingly, knowing the truth has actually made the character of Ma Ingalls feel even stronger to many fans. We can respect the art Michael Landon created and the lessons the show taught us, while still condemning the way he treated his co-star. It is possible to hold both truths at the same time. At the end of the day, Karen Grassle's story wasn't just about a TV show, but about letting out her truth. Do you think Michael Landon was a misunderstood genius or a Hollywood bully? We want to know what you, the fans, think. Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you grew up watching Little House, does this change how you see the show? Outro. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of our videos. Thanks for watching.